K12 at Brookwood School.
The Undersecretary after lunch.
No.
Only a handful. What he essentially talked about, to summarize, is this. Public education, this big revolution with technology, et cetera, that's coming. He warned that this will fail the entire ecosystem. This ecosystem is very resistant to change. So we have a company, K12 Insight, that really works towards that ecosystem. We work with about 300 school districts around the country, and our value proposition is directly for the superintendent and the school board. And our value proposition is that they need to protect their school system from the threat of trust deficit. How many of you know that there's been a serious fiscal deficit in public education funding recently? Don't feel shy, raise your hands. There are two serious deficits in public education. There's the one that everyone talks about, the fiscal. The budgets have been cut 8–10% a year. Okay, they're now being funded at the 1998 level. But there's a second and a more serious deficit in public education that's been underway, and that is the deficit of trust. All you have to do is attend a school board meeting anywhere across America. Anyone know what 2.3 represents? In 2009, that was the average tenure of a superintendent in a urban school system. Now, anybody who's been a CEO, it takes a lot longer to unpack your boxes, get to know the lay of the land before you start changing, really, the system, and then you're gone. So that's gone up, by the way, to 3.9, more than doubled. But then I think that's still very low, and that really presents a risk. So the big risk in public education is this, what I call the perfect storm. The resources are gone, the trust is gone, and the scrutiny of public education is at a level that has never found itself in before. And, if you go see a superintendent, they have a nostalgia about the good old days when what happened in their school system stayed with the local newspaper. With the advent of the social media and the internet, all of that changed. 20 years ago, if I wanted to know about a school system, what was going on, I had to go there and look at the local newspaper. I'm old enough to know that you had to go to the local library and look at microfiche as to what was happening. That's who covered it. Today, everybody with a mobile device really becomes, is a publisher. And if you throw on top of that the anonymity that the internet provides, and really what you have now is a circus across the bigger conversation and the narrative of public education in most communities. The internet empowers everybody. It disproportionately empowers the kind of people who are very predisposed to negative ideas. We fondly call them cave people. Anyone hear the term cave people? Stands for Citizens Against Virtually Everything. They show up at board meetings, and really they tend to dominate the conversation. The ultimate casualty in all of this really is that the CEO, whose job is to transform public education, is become a firefighter. When I go to see my superintendent clients, I tell them I'm tempted to bring a firefighter hat because that's what they do. They are not driving the big issues, they're driving the fires that we lit last night. And really what has happened, really, there is a need for public education to think of this very differently. Schools do two things that have nothing to do with teaching and learning in the classroom. They provide transportation, they provide cafeteria. And we're saying public schools now need to start building trust in the same systematic way. They do it today, they do it ad hoc, they do it episodically, they do it when as a reactionary activity. That's not how they do transportation. They don't show up first day of schools and say, where are the buses? Or what shall we feed the kids? There's a department that takes care of that. So how do we do all of this trust building? And hopefully I've convinced you that there is a threat of trust deficit here. But how do we go about doing it? So the first theoretical aspect of this is the following. That's the bell curve. On any particular issue, most people are in the middle, but the farther you go from the central position, you'll still find a handful of people. Okay? That's our world, those of us who are not in public education. If Linda Clark is here, she's the superintendent. If Jean-Claude is here, he's a superintendent. When his phone rang, the world that called him was not that world. It was the bimodal world of people on the extreme ends. Right? The vocal minority drive the conversations in most school systems today. The fundamental premise of our solution is we need to bring in more people in the middle back into the conversation to restore sanity. Now, I have to say, I have nothing against the vocal minority. The only problem is it distorts the real picture as to what's going on. So our solution is based on, just like you get steel by combining iron and carbon, I think you get something much more powerful by combining research and communication. So we enable school districts to do surveys, and through that, we wrap it around communication, and it doesn't look like surveys anymore, just like steel doesn't really look like iron or carbon. So we have sort of thought about it a great deal. It's surveys that do not generate just data, but they forge a two-way dialogue. That dialogue is used to educate and inform people about the opportunities and challenges before the school district, By making it well-planned and coordinating it, you start to earn the empathy, support, and trust of the public. And then if you can do it using a systems approach so that, just like they do transportation, think about what's before you over the next 18 to 24 months. Plan it so that you are not reacting to the fires on those issues. Anybody have been a witness to a closing of a school in their school district? Barbara Bird Bennett is trying to do that in Chicago. She's trying to close 62 schools. And it looks like World War III out there if you read Chicago Tribune. So the whole focus is on trust. Our solution is built really as a plug-and-play solution. We bring a communications team, a research team. We bring in a fair bit of technology and a help desk around it to help administrators. So they plug in, they like it. We're ready and up and running within 45 days. We've built a fair bit of technology. So this goes, it's a content management system around all of the survey data that we collect. So it goes on their district website. And of course, you know, the 15,000 school districts in America, there's a lot of commonality to them, but no two districts are the same. They're very unique. So our solution is customized, so we pay time and attention to doing that. And I'll end with a couple of examples. So here's a school district outside of Springfield, Massachusetts, trying to build a new high school. $80 to $100 million. 2 years after Lehman Brothers, no one's going to give you $100 million to build a new high school. They'll say, make the old one work. We all went to that high school. It worked for us, so it should work now. So if you did a poll, if you did a normal survey, and you said, would you give us $100 million, people would just say, no, save your money, don't even do that poll. But that issue doesn't do justice, right? That question doesn't do justice to the big top. The current building is a 53-year-old building. Maintenance costs are 2.5 times higher. Children today really don't learn the way we did, certainly not the way our grandparents did. Back then, we used to memorize capitals of states and countries. Today, children sit over Skype. They talk to children in capitals of other states and countries. The architecture of the building fundamentally does not support the kind of learning that's needed today. 2 of the neighboring communities are building high schools. As soon as that happens, some parents are going to take their children away to those schools. And every child who leaves, $4,500 in state aid leaves with that child. It's not $80 million, it's $13 per household per month. So asking the first question, we believe, fundamentally does no justice to it. So we created in such a way that the community gets that context and is informed and educated while they answer. Second example, and I'm done. Here's a survey. School districts like to ask people, how important is this or that to your child's education? So one of the items was central office. Now, central office almost could be a 4-letter word for most parents. When polls are done around America and said, where is there a waste? People say in central office. 24% people thought central office was important, highly important. We had an A-B split. We asked half the people the same question the same way, 24%. We modified it for the other half. We said, by the way, central office does the following for your kids. And we said hiring teachers, principals, staff, make transportation, cafeteria, and that number went up to 86%. High growth company, we're doubling every year. We're hiring 24 people. If any of you are looking for a job in sales, client services, please come see me. Happy to meet anybody in the whole ecosystem. Delighted to be here. Thank you for the privilege.